Thank you for coming. I hope that you like the weather. We said something special. In Israel, we say, you know, a call to God is a local call. So we arrange a nice weather for you today. I'm not sure that it will stay for tomorrow, but let's see. So maybe we should start, Andrea, with a few words of what it is IGU, the International Gas Union.
Thanks, Yossi. First of all, shalom. And it's a very good pleasure for me to be here in Israel. It's my first time, but I'm sure it will not be the only one. As Yossi kindly introduced myself, I will become the president of the International Gas Union, which is proudly saying to be the global voice of gas, with not the 144 years of Chevron, but more than 90 years of representing the gas industry at large. So we are seeking to move and accompany the energy needs of the future, relying on the very fundamental role of natural gas today with new gases for tomorrow. We have more than 80 countries in the IGU, 150 members, and indeed we are trying to support many different countries' geographies in their developments in order to combine security supply, economic development, and lowering emissions. Because I think it's very relevant what is already been said today in terms of solving the energy trilemma. And I'm an European, I'm an Italian, and I was very keen to have the last week meeting between the Prime Minister of Israel and the Prime Minister of Italy, showing the very fundamental needs of Italy and Europe at large for more Israeli gas. So that's one thing that we have to build upon, because unfortunately the 2022 crisis have demonstrated that we have to have more diversification, more resilience, and more energy at the same time. One thing is very crucial in our view in terms of the IGU is the fact that energy needs will increase, not decrease. We have to look at different energy evolutions there. I started speaking about energy transition many years ago, but I normally say nowadays that my transition is from no glasses to glasses. That's certain. That's a path very well described. Energy evolutions instead are requiring very different paths, very different backgrounds, very different solutions. In all of that, we do see natural gas playing a very fundamental role in this respect. And I've understood today from the various presentations, various debate, there is a lot of potential here in the region and here in Israel to support these paths. So it's very important to combine all these aspects, but I will deep dive a little bit more in the following discussion.
Thank you very much. I think it's. I will give everybody the industry perspective to IGU. IGU is like you know, whenever you want to know something about a country, you have all the information and the data in IGU in a very real one, so not theoretical one, because they have partnership in each countries. And here they are working with Yossi Arya and Yossi Rosen and Amir Foster. They have a real data for each country, and everybody that really want to understand natural gas balance in a country, understand the dynamic, I suggest to you to look into the IGU report. Is always helpful.
Thank you, Yossi. I owe you a coffee at least.
Much more than that, but we'll talk about that later. Iskeren, thank you for coming.
Thank you very much for the invitation. For me, it's also the first time in Israel. I'm really delighted to be here. IOGP, International Oil and Gas Producers, we are the global voice of the upstream industry. We are a global association with 85 members all over the world. Personally, I represent the European office of IOGP, IOGP Europe, and our European membership rely on us to interact with the European institutions. I come from the European institutions. I used to work for the European Commission before joining IOGP. And our mission is to promote a reasonable energy transition. We are not against the energy transition. We share the European objective of climate neutrality by 2050, but we believe that the pathway should be different. The pathway should be technology neutral, and we see clearly a big role of natural gas to play during this transition. For us, the question is not renewable against natural gas. We need both renewable energies and natural gas for a successful transition and to secure our energy supply. So to do so, IOGP, as I said, we are strongly interacting with all European institutions, with the European Commission, which prepares the legislative proposals, and then with the European Parliament and with the Council of Ministers that co-legislate, that adopt this legislation. Apart from natural gas, we are also strongly promoting several key mitigation technologies, in particular carbon capture and storage in Europe. And this is something that precisely tomorrow the European Commission is going to adopt an important proposal in this sense. And we try to inform the European decision-making by using studies. We don't have research capacities, but we partner with key scientific institutes and research centers such as Deloitte, such as Rystad Energy in Norway, to bring to the debate, to the decision-making, facts and figures and our expertise in the field.
Great, wow. So I'm in a home game. We have two of the largest gas associations in the world here. So thank you again for coming. I will come back to this capture and storage of CO2 because it's very relevant to Israel right now. It's very relevant to us as we are trying to promote blue hydrogen activity. And in order to do that, obviously, we need a regulation that will allow us to capture the CO2 and basically to find a way to store it in ground. And there's a lot of examples right now globally. I just had a visit in Egypt a month ago, and I saw a project which practically injecting CO2 into a depleted reservoir onshore. Beautiful one, and that allow obviously to clean some of the energy. So both of you, but maybe I will start with you, Andrea, on more the global aspect of the energy crisis. I think we are a little bit, here in Israel we have our local issues. I'm sure that globally there's other issues. We had a very warm winter that helped everybody to basically pass through the energy crisis. But let me tell you something. The energy crisis is here and is still here. And maybe you can give us a little bit of perspective globally on the energy crisis.
Thank you for that. I don't want to bother for a few hours, so I'll try to be very punctual in some statements. For sure, we have seen something that was totally unexpected last year. From a certain viewpoint, the Russian-Ukraine crisis is something that we are seeing every day. But at the same time, I think there are some other elements that we somehow neglected or did not consider well. That is the reduction and the complacency about the reduction of upstream investments in the oil and gas sector since the mid of the last decade. And the International Energy Agency was saying these are the investments needed for net zero. But we have to comply and we have to target long-term targets, but at the same time we have to guarantee energy now, today. And there is a need for LNG for sure. And indeed, let me use my European angle there. In 2021, early 2021, there was one European company that was not having the possibility to sign a long-term contract with a US producer because it was shale gas, and that was a nightmare for Europe. Nowadays, we are praying for having US LNG in Europe. And indeed, LNG, luckily, has been a global commodity since years. And as Yossi was saying, of course, in this long autumn we had in Europe, because it was not a winter, We had also the possibility to rely on the fact that China, last year, for the first time in 20 years, did not grow their energy demand and their gas demand. And the gas demand in China, in terms of growth, is, normally speaking, before COVID, almost 1 France per year, as I say. So about 40 BCM a year of growth. So that's the dimension of the phenomena we have to tackle. And that's where I come from in saying we need more options, not less options.
Yeah, you need a little bit closer.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. That's different. Yeah. I hope it was...
Now everybody can hear you, not only me.
Did you hear my voice in any case?
Yeah, most of it.
Most of it. Thank you. Sorry about that. So the real point is that we have to rely on more options. And we all know how we are today looking at one plant restarting possibly in the US, Freeport. So we have not been used to this kind of attention to the single facility in the last years. We have a tension to resolve, and it's not a tension that is going away tomorrow morning. So it's something that we have to look at and, again, multiply the options. One of the best options I can see from a European, but also looking at the map that Yossi was sharing, regional perspective is here. We have, of course, many different options in the regions. I'll come back then on the Africa optionality there, because as we produced a report on Gas for Africa recently, there is something also in there.
Thank you. Maybe, Iskon, you want to tackle a little bit the European perspective of the crisis, and maybe I think one of the points that may be an interest for everybody here. I think that Israel, we were in a very, very good place vis-a-vis the energy crisis globally, due to the fact that we had Tamar and Leviathan, and we had that production in a certain price for a long term. That was something that really helped the Israeli market not really to feel the crisis. There's one aspect that the Israeli market really feel the crisis, and it's through the coal prices. So a lot of people here, everybody from his own perspective, some want, some don't want, but everybody asks themselves, where is the coal prices going? And that's practically part of it is demand for coal in the European market, and how it's, how the European market get into the next year session with respect to the crisis.
Thank you very much for this question, and in fact, Andrea largely facilitated my reply. But since you mentioned coal, let me remind that energy was at the heart of the European integration process since the beginning, since the 50s, with the creation of putting together coal and steel resources. So let's not forget that was the objective, and it shows how important energy is for us. Basically, after the Russian invasion of Ukraine, which is enormous human tragedy for us, it does have also an important impact on the energy market in Europe. Why? Because of the fact that over the last years, as Andrea rightly pointed out, we considerably disincentivized investment in exploration and production activities in Europe. Let me point out that in 15 out of 27 EU member states, exploration and production activities are banned by law. So with this in mind, Europe developed, unfortunately, a big dependence on one gas supplier, namely Russia. And the amount of gas that we used to import from Russia is around 155 BCM. So the immediate challenge for us last year was how to phasing out this ration, how to replace this 155 BCM. And the obvious answer to this question is via LNG. So LNG demand reduction / destruction with important impact on the European industry and energy efficiency. But still, whatever we can do, there will be still a gap in the coming years. But here is where the solution comes, because there is abundance of natural gas all over the world, with a lot of resources in America, but also close to our region. And I'm very pleased to hear about this new discovery in Israel. We believe that Israel could be a very reliable provider of energy for us. And on the top of that, because of the proximity, which means less cost for transport, and also less greenhouse gas emissions, which is also very important for the planet, instead of bringing the gas from the States. So there are many reasons that for which single European politicians, such as Italian Prime Minister and some others, are looking at your region, because what will never happen in the future is that we will depend only on one supplier of gas. So diversification is a key, and in your case, you're playing with certain advantage because of the geography. But the solution is also for us on our side. We should be open, and this is exactly what we are doing in Brussels, is to promote long-term contracts. Contrary to what some politicians used to say at the beginning of the crisis, we don't need gas only for 3, 4, 5 years. We need gas at least until 2050, and probably even beyond. The difference is that after 2050, this gas will be consumed in the form of hydrogen.
Thank you very much. It's very helpful to understand it, but I think that what I hear, and that's maybe I take to you, what I hear is we are going to suffer, at least in the immediate and the midterm, still with the shortage of LNG to Europe. That will be filled up practically with coal and as it today. And to you maybe, Andrea, what I'm seeing today globally, and this is, just looking on Europe, I think in the last year we had 14 final investment decision on opening new receiving terminal for LNG. So in 1 year, Europe covered a decade of non-investment, and we are still seeing that for the next coming year. I don't see, with all the U.S. investment and the Qatari investment and the Australian investment, and obviously us pushing, LNG, etc., I'm not sure that we'll have, enough LNG to cover all the needs, taking into consideration that China and India and others will come to the table. What is your view on the global LNG dynamic?
Thank you for that. Let me try to respond to this challenging issue with respect to one, let's say, angle that I didn't touch before upon. The crisis we have been facing has driven some Southeast Asia countries to both go again for coal or have power blackouts. So that's making people suffer and making pollution grow. So these two elements are something that we have to really tackle right now. It was unprecedented to have the German government with the Green Party in it fostering and fast-tracking LNG regas terminals. And you're very right, it's something that we have not seen before. The thing is that it's good to have receiving terminals, but you have to receive something. So you have to produce something. So it's something that we are looking at in order to promote time-to-market improvements, time-to-market decision-making from the upstream side, and to reconnect production and consumption altogether. Why long-term has been successful? Because, again, volatility was reduced. Because the real point of distress to the market is high volatility, is not being capable of understanding price dynamics. This is hurting consumers. This is hurting investment decisions. So I think it's very relevant to promote policy, to promote finance stimulus also to upstream in order to fast-track these kind of developments. And again, we have been discussing, and we are doing as an industry, a lot in terms of energy transition. We are talking about green gases, low carbon gases, capture and storage, hydrogen, ammonia, you name it. Innovation is to be pursued. That's something that the IGU is promoting very strongly, very consistently all around the world. Let me go back to another very special case we maybe, or you maybe didn't touch upon. 2021, there was a very severe drought in Brazil. They are an LNG importer, and they were importing from April to September 60 cargoes of LNG in 2021. The year before was 1 cargo. So that requires flexibility. That requires the abundance of resources and the resilience and the abundance of infrastructures. In that respect, let me also give an Italian spin. This year, Italy, which has normally been a destination market, has also exported 4 BCM to Austria. 4 BCM of gas to Austria. Why so? Because we decided to have infrastructure for the so-called reverse flow to make Italy a possible gateway to other regions. So we have to be prepared in terms of thinking and acting in terms of infrastructure development very far and very fast.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I agree with you on that point. Maybe building on that, we were 2-3 weeks ago in Egypt when you published your African report, right? And one of the main aspects in that report was basically develop infrastructure and resources. So maybe you can talk about that, maybe building on that to see how it's being involved in the global gas market.
Thank you for that. Indeed, the Gas for Africa report has been very well received in many different places because I think it raises the knowledge of the possibility of the gas industry to contribute to both economic development and environmental improvement. Let me give you and share with you one single figure which is related to electricity consumption in Africa. In some countries in Africa, the average person is consuming in a year less electricity than a US fridge. That's something that we possibly do not even think it's possible, but it's happening. And if I turn to a different angle, we collectively, but indeed Europeans, are asking African countries to develop more resources, more gas, to export their gas to us because we need that. But there is an inconsistency that we have to resolve. The Europeans are not able to finance any gas infrastructure project there because of the limitations we had in terms of promoting fossil fuels. So we have, again, to evolve our reasoning narrative and making it pragmatic, because pragmatism will be absolutely essential to allow consumers to enrich their portfolio of options. Again, I was also in India in another occasion, and an average Indian person is consuming in a week the same amount of energy an Italian person is consuming in a day. So these are the dimensions we have to address with energy supply. And that's where we, as IGU, promote absolutely a better understanding and best practices for infrastructure developments, not just for exports, but to combine exports with the local developments as well. There is a need to strike the balance all the time.
Very interesting. Thank you. Last question, Iskran. I think, you know, I want to ask you something about the challenge of Europe to try and establish, from one end, a very reliable energy supply, taking into consideration not only the gas aspect, but there's a lot of cause right now in Europe, right? When everybody pushing to renewable, that practically you create a new independency. Most of the renewable aspects supplying coming from China, and then you replace the independency on the Russian gas on somehow independency on the Chinese in supplying panels and turbines, etc., etc. So that's one aspect. But another aspect is obviously the environment vis-a-vis the security of supply. So how all of that being blended into unify regulation or some kind of strategy from European perspective?
Thank you for this question. It's a very complex one. Indeed, whatever we do in Europe does have international impact. Let me start by this. You pointed out several times coal. In fact, in order to replace this 155 BCM, we're competing mainly with China for almost 200 BCM, that is LNG market now. What is the consequence of that? Increase of the consumption of coal, more emissions. So how to conciliate the very ambitious climate objective of EU with security of supply? Let me step back in 2019 when the current Commission took office. One of the priorities of that Commission is the so-called European Green Deal, the purpose of which is to pave the way for the energy and climate transition, adapting the European legislation with a very strong push for renewable energies and decarbonization of the industry. But in the light of the current crisis, we have discovered that somehow we neglected what are traditionally the two other pillars of the European energy policy, namely the security of supply and the affordability of the prices. So with this in mind, now the idea is to rebalance again a little bit this policy, as I said before, via diversification of energy supply, via development of fast-tracking the permitting procedures, and you rightly pointed out the development of renewable energies could lead to another dependence. So the purpose of what the Commission is going to adopt tomorrow is precisely to avoid this dependence, because the new priority of the European Union is the so-called strategic autonomy. We know that we cannot produce all the resources we need, but we will try to produce at least what we have, not as it was in the past, and then to try to diversify as much as possible. And in this sense, Africa is a key continent for us, but also the Mediterranean region. So partnership, realistic and pragmatic approach to the energy transition.
Thank you very much. Thank you both. Thank you for this discussion. Thank you for coming to Israel, and we are expecting to see you when you will be the president again.
For sure, and possibly also before that. I'm not waiting for 2025 to be here again. And let me also give a big thanks to Yossi Aryeh and Amir Foster, who was very much active in the IGU, and thanks for that.
Thank you.